I'm getting better with my titles. They're getting more impressive. The titles are much better than the videos. But at any rate, we're spiritual beings in a physical body. Our thought creates reality and we're all connected. I always start the videos the same way because that's the basis of a human being as I know it. Now, I will ramble again and I'll try to make the video shorter because my videos are too long and too convoluted, as the word goes. And I'm sorry for that. But I have ideas before I start, and then I they come to me and I get confused because it's hard to express them. I'm only trying to really make the videos so that some people will relate and get something from it, to where they can see that things are different to what they thought. And in order to do that, I will think about things myself that relate to me in a way. So I'm going to just use an example because it just come to me before I started, that like in this world, like I think I've said before in the video, that the God entity that operates, shall we say, this earth, because he does operate it. Even the humans that operate or work for the entity, they operate and operate this world. It's not a world that we create our thinking or our reality with our thinking, with our thoughts, with our feelings, with our mind. We create our reality with that, but we are not aware that we're doing it. But the entity God knows our every thought, knows how to manipulate the mind, because, you know, this being is much more advanced at in the sense, see there again, I am talking through my hat. I will say that to you right now. I'm talking through my hat in the sense that I don't have the full answers. I don't have all the details. There's still missing pieces, a lot for me. But what I put out as it comes to me, I put it out, and some people will be able to advance much more in this fake reality with a little bit of information. And they will all, it might just also, if you're confused like we all are about the world, it might just help you to put things more into place. It might be another piece of the puzzle for you, because until you can sort of see all until you realize you've got all these pieces and then they start to fit, that's the only way that you can really establish that the world is different to what you would have thought, and that there's really two worlds that are operating in this world at this time, in a way, because there's the world that we live in, but it's a bit like the real world, like, you know yourself, like I might be living in the slums, right? And another person might be living in a mansion. So those two people are living in different worlds. That's how it is in this world. There are even humans in this world are living in different worlds, because although they're all on the same space on this earth, if your surroundings and even your knowledge, even the information you're given, or even like this, like if you're a scientist, you're going to know things and be given access to technology and to the other realms that I'm not given. So that's why I'm floundering and others know more. But as I've said before, this is supposed to be a time when even us simpletons, shall we say, are supposed to be seeing that this world is much more than what we thought it was. That's a bit like if you, I suppose, you decide to try a new career or or study a new field. All of a sudden, your mind will be opened up to things that you weren't aware of. And this is what it's all about. It's really just being aware, because others have said that a human being at their highest is 100% awareness. And this I would definitely agree with at the higher at the higher spiritual level, because as I said before, we're spiritual beings. Okay, we're spiritual beings. I think I'm not doing this video very good today. We're spiritual beings in a physical body. That's essentially what we are. So, and our thought creates reality, and we're all connected, and everything is frequency and vibration. As I've said before, this is science fact. So we are operating with those things going. If you have to use your imagination that way, and you have to start to say, look, yes, we are not what we think we are at all. We are a totally different thing. And the ones that control the world, the God entity, they know all this. And uh, as usual, I'm not getting it right. Oh dear. Perhaps I should just go back to what I was going to say at the start. I was going to talk about the reality that the God entity, or even humans that are in a different world to us, they might have, like I say, one person could be living in the slums, another in the mansions, have access to the science, access to every possibility that this world has to offer, because they have more access to these things, because they might be financially affluent and that type of thing. So they can like in the old movies, and I say all these movies have been telling us for a long time, like even my old movies, the old science fiction type movies, the old little horror movies, shall we say, because we are living in a type of horror movie in the sense. But anyway, what I was saying was that, like I've got to keep my thoughts here. It would be like if I had a lot of money, I will then be able to talk to the scientists, and therefore they can give me a lot of goodies. And if I got money, I might say, hey, I want to live forever. I want the fountain of youth. Do you have anything along that line? And they might say, oh, well, this is dicey. We're experimenting and stuff, but oh yeah, you can try it. In other words, I will have access to what I would call the mad scientists, because in the movies that's what they show them as. Because at some point they get to where, yeah, they're geniuses, they're genius scientists, but at some point they let their genius run away with them, don't they? You see that in the old horror type movies, where the mad scientist starts out wanting to do something good for humanity, but ends up going off track and building the Frankenstein's monster, and it all turns out wrong. This is the reality of the world, and this is what happens behind the scenes, because this is how we humans are. And the only reason I'm not guilty of that is because I'm not someone who has access to these things. You see, that's what I'm saying. So even in this world we live in, you'd be aware that there are many different worlds, even at a human level. But if you're dealing with other entities, then you have to say we are dealing with even more worlds in this world that we and you and me don't have access to. So you're saying, why am I talking about it then if I don't have access to it? How do I know it? Well, this is only because some people their reality starts to change for them, because circumstances change. They might see things that they didn't. Look, the Matrix, it operates around everyone. It's a matrix, it's a fake world, it's controlled by the God entity. It's his creation, you could say, because he manipulates and operates everything in it. Through humans, humans operate against and for other humans. Some, you know, it's like that. It's a game, and that's why the title was The Mind Games of this Mastermind, Archon, Mind, Parasite. That's the title. I can see it. I wrote it there. It came to me. But essentially, I've done it before. But mind games of the mastermind, genius, Archon, because that's the descriptive term of the god and his many disciples, entities, minions, other beings of might be different denominations. I'm not going to go into that details, and I'm not 100% sure. I only go on the information I'm given. I feel sure that they are different races. They're not all one race, they're probably different, but you know, you could, a bit like on this, in our real world, you could have different races in the same country, and so they will all follow the same leader and all be part of that country. It's the same thing. You don't have to be of the same kind, but there will be a hierarchy, and as we have a hierarchy on earth, everything that we have on earth is reflective of what is the God entity, or even the humans that operate for this. We are a reflection of that. You have to realize that, because it is a matrix, and if you are controlled and under the directions of someone or something else, even in your personal life, you know, the old saying, you're only as good as the company you keep, and that is true. So we will be a reflection, and this world, as we are in this world, is a reflection of the God entity. Everything that takes place every day is a reflection of his mindset and his minions and his disciples and those that follow. That is their way of wanting the world to be. We merely react to the situations presented to us, and we are usually, you know, because it is such a matrix, it's a total matrix, you know, it's not something, even though we are creating in it, because we're unaware we're creating in it, because we are unaware of how it is a mind game matrix. You see, it's not just, it is a physical matrix in the sense that bad things happen physically to us, right? But it is also mainly a mind game matrix for most people. For you know, even though I say it's all, because everything in it is now, you know, everything is operated. Everything that happens is something that has been put there. You know, everything, every single thing. But I was going to say that this God entity, like I said in a video before, like a vampire, because, you know, we are the source of energy for the God in a way, and we create for the God, and we keep this matrix going. Without us, the matrix doesn't exist, but we do not have any actual real, we don't really have any real control over the matrix, even though we create the matrix, which is kind of strange in a way. It's a contradiction, but that's because everything in this world is a contradiction. That is the mastermind, that is the mind game. Everything is a contradiction. Everything is set up, everything is playing all the time. And the example I was going to give was that the God entity, I liken it to a vampire, okay? In the sense that it sees itself as superior to the human. As a vampire is immortal and the human is mortal, and the vampire, this is not really true though, by the way. I would say this is not true, but I'm going to use this as an example. The vampire to the human appears to be more superior in the sense that it's immortal, but it is considered to be bad, isn't it? Because it feeds off the human and it sucks the human and it kills the human, etc. And it seduces the human and then kills it. All the, you know, you've seen all the movies. I used to watch so many vampire movies. It was my favorite genre. Mistake. Well, not a mistake, but I was seeing it, and I always did see it in a different light to most people because I like that genre. This is why I'm using this personal example. Now, the god entity is like that in that sense that the vampire, um, merely sees the humans as a necessity, a necessary source of survival because the vampire needs the human blood to survive. And if he gets the human blood, he can survive indefinitely. And he has many superior abilities over the human. This is all false, by the way, but it's a good analogy. I think it's false if I look at what I consider to be the true history of things now. But that's just my view. But it's interesting anyway, the vampire movies and things, okay? Now, I watched them for years, but in recent times, even though I hadn't seen them, they brought out Twilight movies. Now, that went much more to, because I used to think when I used to watch the vampire movies, the old ones, the vampire was always the bad guy in those movies, because he seduced the women but didn't want to make love to them or didn't like them, just wanted their blood and to kill them, really. And some he would make a vampire like himself, which was also considered not good. It was considered that you were entering into death. The humans were always the heroes of the old vampire movies. And I always thought to myself, being a bit of a loner and away from society, I used to sometimes think, oh, well, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't be so bad to be the vampire because he lives forever. The humans only have one another, and I thought maybe if you become a bit antisocial, you might not have that need of the human thing so much. So I did consciously think that, even though I never watched the movies rooting for the vampire. I might tell you that I didn't. I always did root for the humans. But um, but I still thought, hey, from a realistic point of view, if I was a vampire, yeah, but I would have to kill and suck their human blood. And that was probably the one issue. And this is the problem I have in this real world situation with the satanic type thing and all that. This is the only problem I have with it. I'm not speaking for or against any of these things because I see it as a real thing that some people indulge in, believe, worship, etc. But getting back, I'm getting confused here. They brought in the new Twilight movies, which actually tended to show a different view of the vampire, didn't they? Because for the first time they were thinking a little bit more like, and there again, I haven't seen a lot of them, but they're romanticizing the vampire, that genre, as opposed to showing it as a horror. That's right, a bad guy, a bad thing, something to be frightened of, something to be feared, evil Satan, that type of thing. That's all the vampire old movies. Whereas in the new movies, it was glamorizing. Okay, so there was a human character, I think, in it, a female human character, but the other male characters, which are highly glamorized and highly romantic and highly handsome and desirable and all this sort of stuff, they are essentially vampires, from what I can gather. So that is an interesting turnaround in the movies. Make of that what you will. I was surprised when I saw one of these movies. I haven't seen them all, and I wouldn't say I disliked them, but they were new to me because I was used to the old movies where the vampire was clearly a satanic type figure, evil, bad for humans to have anything to do with under any circumstances. If you knew he was down there in his castle, the best thing you could do would be to be at least 100 miles away. But no, in the newer movies, there is a much more glamorization, a romantic I mean, you've got the human having a romantic relationship with essentially a vampire, and the vampire is not shown um, as satanic, evil, or detrimental to that human being, which is the complete reverse of what we've been used to. And I was surprised by that, and I thought that's interesting. And I also probably thought, yeah, see, if you had like, well, you know, it's like you've got the female and the male vampire, and the female would probably at some point, if she's in love with the vampire and sees the vampire as more good than bad, even though do not those vampires still need human blood? I've forgotten that now in the movie, because see, this is what I'm trying to say, if I can without the distractions. That's a contradiction too. This is a dilemma too. This is like, you could say it's almost it's a bit of a moral dilemma in a way, even whether you're moral or not. Well, if you don't have morals, or you don't actually, if you're the sort of person that basically doesn't care for human life, who already is anti-live, evil, the opposite to, as I've said, the opposite, if you reverse the word evil, it is live. Evil is essentially anti-live. That's how I would look at it, and this is the information I've been given. So it's not evil, it's not bad, it just works against life. Okay? That's putting it that way, because if a particular entity is evil, that is just that it is anti-life for a human, but it is not anti-life for the entity, because the entity needs the blood to survive. The entity needs the human. He needs to drain the human. He needs to exploit the human, as happens here on Earth by other humans who think this way and who worship this way, shall we say, or who believe these things. And the same as if you say the God entity, then the interdimensional technologically advanced being that controls and operates our Earth realm, shall we say. You know, so the entity itself is, that's why I found this movie strange, or at least interesting, because it was kind of showing humans to open their mind up to this possibility that something that should be seen as evil is not, the being itself may not see itself as evil. It is only evil from the human perspective, because they are going to be the victim. They are going to lose their blood. They are going to lose their earthly life, or they're going to have to live a different life, you know, where they cannot see the sunshine, etc., all this sort of stuff. Whereas the you know, the entity is I'm sorry about the distractions, you know, but it's like the planes and things. But I'm saying that depends on which perspective you're coming from. So the entity, only the God entity or the vampire only does not see the human the way the human sees the entity. But in this movie, you've got an incident where normally the human would see the vampire as a big threat to their existence and would not want that existence, and would see that vampire as bad because they partake and kill other humans, take their blood, etc. You've got an example of where there is a sympathy for the devil, you could say. That just come to me, that line, you know, that's from something, it's from somewhere. These things just come to me, but if they make sense to you and if they fit, that's good, because they make sense to me when they come to me. In other words, yeah, she had sympathy for the devil, sympathy for the vampire, and eventually love for the vampire and admiration for the vampire, etc., etc., whatever you like, and this sort of thing. And this is just interesting. And this is how some people are, I think, towards the God entity. Instead of seeing, you see, it's all a matter of what you think is okay, and your from where you're coming from. I'm trying to be fair here, you see, because I'm aware that there is two ways to look at it, and you have got two sides, really. You have got the dark and the light, and you have got two sides. You have got two opposing forces in a way. But see, realistically speaking, and I'm sure I've lost you because I'm going even more airy-fairy than ever, but some people, this is the problem with my videos now, is that I didn't want to make videos for people who already are thinking this way. But at the same time, it's almost hard without getting airy-fairy and without going into something that is now where I know myself, where I've had to go out of my little safe reality. It is almost impossible to make the video without becoming airy-fairy, shall we say. Now, I'll probably have to stop because there's so many distractions, because the Matrix, may or may not, as you can hear, may or may not want you to make the video, or may think, now, and I look stupid then with the distractions because I can't concentrate, and that is the Matrix too. This is it. Everything is the Matrix. Everything is part of everything else. Everything is part of the Matrix. There is no separation at all. Everything that happens every second is either created by me being negative in my thinking subconsciously, which I am now because the Matrix the Matrix will intervene to make you negative, and then you will react to the negative with negative thought, and then you create a reality that is negative. It's kind of like that. And it's exactly like that, except that I don't have control over it, and neither do you. Some people might, I don't know, there might be some very advanced humans that are at that, but I would think that if you are at a high frequency, then you are not going to be reacting to the Matrix. Whereas if you're at low frequency, like me and most people, and the Matrix only operates, the Matrix can only affect you when you're at low frequency, I believe. If you're in a high frequency, because everything's frequency and vibration, and our thought creates reality, we're all connected and all this. So what we are doing, we're really in chaos, because we as humans are in chaos because we don't know all this, and yet we're creating it subconsciously all the time. The God entity and those that are aware of all this and have more access to the ability, shall we say, to intercept human thought, manipulate human thought, control human thought, and manipulate the physical reality at a psychological level and at a physical level, at every level. Those that have the power, the technology, the power, the knowledge, and the understanding of how things work, they can, the God entity can totally operate this reality any way that he likes it to play. If he wants to play with me, He can play with me any way he wants. He can manipulate every single thing around me. He can manipulate the people around me. He can manipulate the physical world around me. I should be able to have more ability just as a single entity. And I am connected to all other humans, but I said humans because different human beings are going to be more accessible due to their vibration, which is largely determined by your circumstances, you see. So it's like I said, it's a massive mind game. You really have to look at it at all levels. So some humans, you know, are not as open to that connection because they have closed it off because of circumstances, because the matrix, which is your surroundings and your environment, has made them negative, as it's, and that is, and this is a negative domain. It operates that way, and as I've said before, it's essential for it to stay at a low frequency in order for the God entity to have more ability to interact with the humans and to make them play in the game, because it's his mind game, it's his video game, it's his virtual reality world, if you like. He can manipulate the hologram, he can manipulate the reality. We, as humans, we're supposed to be able to do that, and we had that ability, but we don't know it. We've lost touch with our connection. Everything has been closed down for us. This has been a gradual process over a long period of time, I believe. And so we are operating at a very limited level, whereas the God entity has been advancing all the time, because he's not a God, I don't think, that does not advance. He's a God, an entity that is continually improving the technology, continually manipulating things, continually playing with genetics and all this stuff that not only goes on behind the scenes in our human world, because we know that they can clone and they can create synthetic gene. I saw it on a paper on the computer, because, and they even tell you this, they will even tell you these things in the news, as I've said before, but we just don't take much notice, because why would we? I know I don't, because we think, oh, it's not going to affect my little real world, and it doesn't. But that's because we are just playing in this game, while there is this separate world that then is used to, like to plonk things into our game, to, oh, geez, it's like, oh dear, I've lost that again. Oh, look. But it's like that I was saying about the vampire thing, the movies and things. That is a mind thing. That is a mind game, if you like, because I was before thinking, you think of a vampire a certain way, right? And then you watch a different movie 50 years later, it all of a sudden has changed your mind about the concept and the idea of a vampire. Now this is what I'm trying to get across, but I'm not going to do it very well again, is that in real life, in this real world, there are people, humans, that would find this acceptable to worship a vampire, okay? Or to be like a vampire. They would find that acceptable because they had the mindset of like I had when I used to see the old vampire movies, right? To where I saw them as a horror movie. But I sometimes used to think, hey, I wouldn't mind being Dracula. After all, I wouldn't mind the fact that he can live forever. If I could just get over that idea that I'm killing a human being and sucking all their blood to sustain my immortality, and if I don't mind not seeing too much sun, and I might have a few fellow other Draculas, other ones, yeah, that's right, all this sort of stuff. Like, am I not better off than some of the humans? Because they only live for a very limited time, and I can go on for thousands and thousands of years, and they get all their sickness and all this stuff. They can't climb up a wall and fly around as a bat like me and all this sort of stuff. You might actually start to say, hey, that wouldn't be a bad life, a bad deal to make a deal with Dracula or the devil or Satan, because he's obviously there's a lot of satanic stuff associated in the old movies with Dracula and stuff, and it's all like that, isn't it? But and this is what I hope I'm not losing you, but I'm trying to say that it could perhaps be tempting in the real world if that kind of thing was presented to you. You would be in that dilemma. Some would find it quite easy to say, well, look, I'm not, I only really, I want to live forever, and I don't love every human being on the planet. And hey, look at what a mess they make of the world anyway. Look at how destructive and bad most of them are. I think I'll just take this for myself and not care about most of the other humans. And I would have no trouble sucking the blood of quite a lot of them, because they're evil anyway, those humans. A lot of them, look at the way they carry on. Of course, that is the setup of the Matrix, but the thing is that, from a realistic point of view, it would be easy to justify that, and the rewards would appear to be quite great if you've got that mindset, if you're following me. Whereas, like in the old days, in the old movies, it would not probably be a consideration. Most people would not probably have thought that way. They would have thought, oh, that Dracula's terrible, and oh, I wouldn't want to be involved in that lifestyle. Even immortality wouldn't be a temptation to actually have to live that particular lifestyle. Um, that's what I'm saying, is like that. Everyone would like to be immortal, even lower spiritual beings. Spirits can't really die, I wouldn't think. But that's another point, and maybe part of our deception as human beings, and why we play in the Matrix, and why some would even, yes, be certainly attracted to the Dracula idea of immortality and have no problem drinking someone else's blood to sustain that. If you follow me, I'm talking about a mind game here on this earth, but I'm also talking about a concept. I'm saying that is like a moral concept. It is like that. That's whether you believe in morals or not. It's like religion and all these things. You don't have to believe in it, but you would have to probably have a basic idea that if you're a human, you don't particularly want to kill another human and drain them of blood to sustain yourself. But that's what I say. It would be, we can watch. You see what I'm trying to say? Am I saying it well? That in this new movie, you see good in the Dracula, as opposed to seeing evil like you would have in the older movies. You see what I'm saying? How it's turned around, and there's confusion here now. Whereas you once had a clear picture of Dracula's the devil, Satan. He's possessed and he's demonic, and he sucks human beings' blood, kills them to sustain his own life. He's a different entity to a human being. He's not human at all. And this is how we saw him. Whereas now in the new movie, we've romanticised the Dracula, like I say, I was guilty of that even with the old movies. But it was interesting. That's why I took note of it. This is why I'm taking note. I'm just putting it here as a concept and saying, isn't it interesting that it's now changed round, and that now Dracula, or a vampire, same thing, well, he was always romantic even in the old ones because he seduced the women. He only had to stare at them and they'd come to him, and then he'd suck their blood and they'd be gone. That he had the power of seduction even as a figure. But but in the new movies, it's not just the power of that seduction where you're actually, when you're watching it, you're looking at Dracula and thinking, oh, that poor woman, she's being seduced and he's going to kill her. Whereas in the new movie, it's highly romanticized to where the lead characters are young fellas that you find that you're going to fall in love with, that you actually see as good too, because you've changed, you've tweaked your mind to where you've said, oh look, this person is doing something bad. Because if you suck someone else's blood and you need someone's blood to survive, how can that be good? But you've tweaked it to where you're saying that person is really good. That's just what that person, which is what I say. A vampire still is just doing what he has to do to survive. That is actually true. But I'm saying from a human perspective, if a human start, you see, it's like that. You see what I'm saying here? There's a contradiction. This is the world. This is the mind game. That's what I say. Everything is a mind game in this world. And unless you start to see it, I mean, you can play with it and you still have a choice. But most of us are not seeing that we're being tweaked all the time as well. I'm saying even when you're tweaked, you still have a choice. You could still say, oh, I'm going to go with the handsome, blood-sucking vampire Dracula lead actor, you know, and I'm going to go off into the sunset and suck blood and this and that, and, you know, he's more important than other human beings. You know, that's, I think that's the only way you could see that. But at the same time, you know, you could justify it and you could say it's right. So it's a question of, yeah, what you think about that. And I just found it interesting. I found it, when I thought about it, I thought this is very eye-opening for me. I don't think I put this across very well, and I could have done it in a quicker time, yeah. But you do see what I'm saying, and there's so many examples of this. There's a billion examples every day on this earth where we are tweaked. I use that word tweaked, I mean to where we're in this mind game, and to where what we think about things, or what's presented to us is only one way. And we don't realize that if we look at the history of things, we get tweaked. Because that example of the horror movie, because I was a horror movie thing, so I noticed it. But it happens in every other thing too, to where you're just being tweaked all the time. Now, I'm not saying that it's good or bad. It is a choice. But we are tweaked all the time because we're in this mind game reality that is false. My only objection to it is that we don't see it for what it is. We don't know that we're tweaked most of the time, and we don't realize that it's from your perception, okay? It's still got to be your own perception. If I say something is evil, right, I say it's anti-live. Evil is anti-live. Evil is anti-life at a human level. But, you know, like the Dracula thing, it's anti-life in a general kind of human thing. But at a personal level, some people might say, well, I don't care about humans, even though they're my own kind, that I don't know, because they're not operating under the concept that we're spiritual beings. Our thought creates reality and we're all connected. They're operating under that we're non-spiritual beings, that we don't create anything and we should just take everything and manipulate the reality at a technical level or at a physical level, and that we are not really spiritually connected in any way. So therefore, you could be good and you might think I'm bad. And so therefore you're justified in your actions because I'm not as good as you, I'm bad, or I've made mistakes, or you know, you will see yourself as separate from other people, so you won't have to consider that other person as much. Um, I mean, you may or you may not. You might fall in love with Dracula or with whatever, like in the movie. I'm going all over the place, but you see what I'm saying? It's you will be selective, but you certainly won't see yourself as part of being connected to every other human being or human being. I shouldn't have said human because I only said that because I do think there are different types of human beings. In the sense, only in the sense that there are human beings and there could be other entities, okay. I'm not going to go that. We could be living in a they live type world, okay. We probably are. But I'm not going to go there. I'm going to assume that we live in a world where this planet is only populated by human beings, real human beings, I mean, where they're 100% human. But still amongst that, you have psychopathic types of people who are less interested in other human beings and certainly wouldn't think they're connected to other human beings. In fact, they would be more like the vampire, where they're quite happy to kill another human being or suck another human being dry in psychological or otherwise. They might literally be doing it. I'm sure some might literally do it even. I don't know what goes on in this world, but you know what I'm saying. But um, it's a mindset and it's a mind game. I think I need to go on to something else now because I think I've become too confusing for you. I know I may not be confusing myself in my mind, but I'm just not getting the thoughts clear to put it into a verbal thing. And because I'm trying to find examples to show the confusion of the world, to show how this world is really a mind game. This is the problem. And even then you get into the confusion because it is a total confusion mind game. Like I was trying to just show little examples of the conflicts that we have, of the contradictions, and of how things can even change. That shows that you are in a mind game because things are changing. You might say, well, that's an improvement, that's a different thing, and that's more awareness that we now can see the Dracula as a romantic leading man as opposed to a devil that sucks humans dry, and takes them into a demonic hell-like realm. No, you see what I'm trying to say is that that's the mind game. Because if you can change my mind by by a, if you can change my concept in my mind about something, then you know that's mind games at its best. That's mind games at its biggest, mind game manipulation or exploitation, whatever you like. But it's changing. If you can change people's concepts and their way of thinking, for good or bad, I'm not saying whether it's good or bad, but I'm saying you are changing people's mind. And there's lots of ways that this can be done. And we live in a mind game world. This is essentially what I'm trying to say, and this is what I came to this realization, that everything around me and everything is always trying to infiltrate my mind and try to change it or direct it, whatever. And you might say, oh no, I've got my own mind. I'm not influenced by what's around me. I'm pretty sure I know who I am and what I am. But I'm not going to say I would not argue personal details with people, but I might still see it, and I've seen it in myself because I'm saying I am mind controlled. I am at the mercy of what is around me. And what I thought about myself a few years ago is not what I think about myself now. I only hope that what I think about myself now is more awake and more clear than what it was through most of my life. Because if you had asked me even a few years ago, what do you think about yourself? What identity do you associate with? How do you see yourself as a person? What oh, I don't want to go into too many details because this is not something I like to do, but you could say, you're a female, you're this, you're that, you're that. I could have said a few years ago, no, 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 I'm not that, I'm this, and very much like they do now, to be honest. This is what probably surprises me, the same as the Dracula movie incident that I was talking about. It's strange that how I used to think about myself through most of my life, where I thought I was odd and was not fitting in the norm, normal human beings that have certain relationships, shall we say, that go with certain people, they do certain things in life. I always thought, no, I don't see myself that way. I see myself as more singular that way. And I used to think, I wish I was more normal because normal, there was such a thing as normal a few years back. There was more of a guideline for normal, whereas now we have no guidelines for normal. Now everything goes. There is no normal, there is no this, there is no that. We're all free, we're all liberated, we're all one big, whatever we want to be. But are we? Or is this part of the mind game of the world? Because it has to be, because we are in a mind game, delusionary world. So what I thought was my identity then, and I was sure of, and I thought it was different to everyone else, which is now the norm anyway, I would have to say that whatever you think you are, whatever you consider yourself to be, or what you want yourself to be even, unless you really are seeing yourself as a spiritual being and realizing that you are limited and that you are not free really to think or to be what you are. No, the opposite to that, and that you have been made limited at every level because you are not at a high vibrational level. None of us are. And we are not aware that the world even operates that way. Essentially, humans in particular, and I know this was true of myself, very much pushed into this physical realm to where what appears to be most important to us is our identity and who we are is based much more on your physical demeanor even. And that is the mind game of the matrix, a matrix that you did not create, even though you are creator in it, because your thought creates reality. But this also, I would like to say, listen, because I'm not 100% sure about this, right? And I'll say this about everything I say. I can't say 100%, but we are meant to be creators with our thinking and our subconscious, but that's closed off to us. All our stuff is all closed down, as you know. We do not have access to any abilities at all anymore. And we are limited, very limited, even in our knowledge and our awareness, because I'm saying that I'm seeing things now, so I'm becoming a bit more aware, but I still do not have access to the higher realms. I do not have access even to the knowledge and the information that the more not more advanced humans, but more humans that have more money and more able to be in contact with your mad scientists and this sort of thing. You know how I said that at the beginning, the mad scientists that can create and can create a Frankenstein's monster if you wanted them to, or if they want to, and can play around with genetics and all this sort of stuff that that they can do and that they have always been able to do. You know, the Frankenstein monster was 1930, um, that movie, so what I'm saying is that it's always been there that humans think like this. So it's only natural that if you're uh, in a position to access these things more, you're going to play around with them more, and you're going to start to see yourself as close to the God entity, which is also a technological thing, and where all this is the opposite to what a human is and to what a human even needs. But this would be impressive to most humans because we don't think that we can do anything ourselves, because we are at, as I've said before, at low level. So all our abilities to create, even because we are supposed to create with our thinking and our whole mind, and have access to all the awareness of what's going on. So therefore we are operating with full knowledge, shall we say. But we don't have that. I don't have that. But some humans have more of that than others, and some have more access to it than others because they would be in contact with humans even that know more about the science and the body and all that, and the reality. It's a bit like if you're a scientist, you should know more about the so-called universe and this sort of stuff and all this thing. Now, how much they really know, I do not know. I do not know if the God entity lets some humans have much more knowledge. I'm sure he does, but whether the more advanced beings let even the top humans know everything, I do not know. Okay, so it would be a hierarchy. I would probably suggest that if I was the God entity, I probably would not let even my favourite human beings know everything, because that would give them the level of God that the God entity is, and he would not want that, because he wants to be the God entity and have mastery over his domain, shall we say? So, but they still get more than me and you, and we're in the dark, sort of thing. But it's only if you start to see that the world is, if the matrix becomes exposed to you, because if you, as I said before, if you're going to raise your vibration, whether it be deliberately or accidentally, as I said before, the matrix will probably expose itself to you, because at that point the God entity will say, look, I'm going to let the matrix be exposed to some people, even though I don't want to expose it to them, but you're playing the game, and even he will say, this is the game, all right, but the game is that you have to stay at low vibration, because otherwise you will operate separately from the matrix. And the God entity wants the matrix to keep going, and wants to have and wants to be able to play us in the matrix. And if we raise the vibration, then we separate from the matrix, and therefore we are not going to be playing with the God entity or the other humans that are disciples of the matrix God, or whatever you like. What I'm saying? You got to get that whole concept, and it's hard, because until you see that happening, the matrix, but the matrix will then be exposed to some people for that reason, because the God entity will say, I don't want to show the matrix to that person really, but if they raise the vibration, they change the matrix, and they no longer will be a player for me. So I have to expose the matrix. I have to let the matrix. I have to come down on those individuals in the matrix, because that keeps the matrix intact. And if it's only a few individuals or a limited number, even if it's more of a number, it's a necessary evil, even if the God does not want to do that, because he will lose either way, you see. So it's like, if I bring the matrix down, and particularly if it is brought down in a way to control and keep the individual in the physical realm. Because if you're going to raise your vibration, that means you're going to be more content, you're going to be happy, you're going to be not at the low frequency of negativity thinking, of anger, anxiety and fear and all that sort of thing, particularly fear. But if you can bring the matrix down on people to where, oh, my reality is now not what I think, and oh, I'm in a matrix, even exposing the matrix creates fear, because you're like, oh, I thought I was in a human free world, whereas I'm in a matrix. You know, like in the movie The Matrix, where the shock at first is quite great, even though that person was looking for the truth and quite willing, you know, this red pill and blue pill business that they talk about, the blue pill is really only seeing the one world, whereas the red pill is where you're seeing both worlds. Because you're not saying that the blue world doesn't exist, because that was my world. The blue world exists. It's a real world. It's just that it's not. It's seeing the trees instead of the forest. In other words, they're saying you can't see the forest for the trees. Well, taking the red pill is just where you see the forest, whereas when you're in the blue pill, you're only seeing the trees. It might be okay for some people, and it might be more comfortable, because the forest is a dense jungle. Yeah, it is not going to be. That's right. When you see the matrix, it is not going to be pleasant, because you're going to see a lot of bad stuff. Whereas maybe if you can stay just looking at the tree, that might be a nice tree. You might be relatively comfortable, even though it's ignorance, of course, because you're only seeing a limited thing. But it still might be more comfortable. And this is why a lot of people, if you did present them with those two pills, which was why there is a choice, they will subconsciously back away from that red pill, and you can't blame them. But if you're in the matrix and you're about to raise the frequency, you will be forced to take that red pill, even though you haven't consciously chosen to take it. I know I didn't. But if the matrix comes down on you a bit, in other words, if you are going to raise your vibration, then the matrix will try to put the frequency back down. So therefore it will expose itself, and it will deliberately actually try to bring the frequency down anyway. So whereas before it was covert, it's a covert matrix, where humans are allowed to play in it, thinking that they've got their little docile little world, and they're almost happy in it. They're like little, we're like cattle that are in a pen, but it's a big pen, and we're happy in that. We have a little bit of grass, hopefully. Actually, this is not the case for the real world anyway, but some of us might have a little bit of grass, but we're not allowed to go past the fence. We're not allowed to, and we don't go past the fence, because the paddock is big enough to where we don't need to I think I've lost this, but you see, my point is that you can be in a limited way of thinking and a limited world, not knowing everything. And most of my life I thought, I don't need to know. I know that most people know more than me. I know that that science knows more. I know that I don't even have a good knowledge of so many things, but I'm thinking, I don't need to. I'm just plodding along, and I don't think that it's actually going to hurt me by being in ignorance or in the dark. But the matrix does control you. So, if you don't know there's a matrix, and you don't know that it is a control matrix, because a matrix is artificial, it's contrived, it's set up. So it does have the elements of control. It's not like just an earth where you're plonked on it, as I believe we were originally. Once you have an entity, or even humans, that control the earth, you are then in a matrix, because it is not operating naturally. it is operating via mechanical means, you could say. It's operating via systems, by having to do things a certain way. Whereas if something was organic and natural, it would just flow naturally, it would just develop naturally, as humans were meant to be, I think, originally, but there was the intervention, the arrival of the God, all that sort of stuff. And so then, of course, we don't have this knowledge either, unless you look at the alternative history, as I've said, because, um, because, we just think that, everything's just happened as a history evolved, and we have limited history. And this is another example of the matrix, in the sense that even the history that we know is limited. Like, I was never a big history person. I don't know most of the civilizations, but I was fascinated a little bit by maybe one or two. So I might think, oh, the Great Pyramid of Giza, that's very interesting. I wish I could have had a look at it maybe, or something, or this sort of thing. But now I'm like, like that's only one little thing. I still didn't know very much. I didn't know about all other civilizations and things. So even science has always said we don't really know that much about these things, a bit like the missing link and everything. So we've always had a very, very limited fake history anyway. By fake, I mean that it's not really very filled in, and probably even what we do have, because even though we know there have been civilizations, because we're so far disconnected from them, we don't really connect them all up, and we don't relate it to ourselves at all. We don't, we don't relate it to we as we are now. We think we're the highly evolved, wonderful human beings that we are, and we're actually, not really that at all. And actually, I don't know, even if I didn't believe some of this stuff that I do now, I would still have to say that any human being, and I would say this even about myself, if I have to be on a computer all the time, which I am, and if I have to be asking those things, all the questions, to establish a life for myself, and to establish even who I am and what I am and how to actually live, that's right, how to actually live. And if I have to be told that I should think a certain way, or that I should believe certain things, or that I should even just see myself and other people a certain way and accept that, I am not really me at all. I am just a product of my culture, my surroundings, my time, the times even. And you only have to look at things over recent years to see how the times have changed. And this is something that I've noticed. And so it's like, I'm not thinking for myself. We just go with the times. We go with the flow. We go with the fashion. We go with the trends. There might be a few examples of people that don't do that, but they're very rare. And they don't make any difference, because this is why it's important for, I think, for us to look at this now, particularly at this time, because and it's easy for me to say, because I'm seeing, like I say, if you see a matrix and you realise that everything is very much a setup and a kind of construct, it's like, okay, it's like this. Now, the examples of the Dracula thing, right, and the movies, you can make a choice. You can be that girl, like in the Twilight type movie, where she's like, oh, I think I like this vampire fella. He is good. I think he is good. I know he does some naughty things, but I still think he's essentially good, and I want to go with him forever. and so that is a choice. Now, is she playing the game in the Matrix? Is she being tweaked? Has she been tweaked? Has she lost sight of what she really is? Or is she making a good choice? You know, that's, I, what can you say about that? It's still, and if you're given limited information, you will make your choices on the information you have. The only way you can perhaps really know if you're even making, if there is a correct choice, because it's not for me to say what's a correct choice, but the old saying, an informed decision. The more, I mean, if you're making a decision based on only seeing the trees as opposed to seeing the whole forest, you might still get out of it okay, and it might not still be a bad choice for you, but you will be making a limited choice. And most of us in this fake world that we live in are making limited choices because we don't see the forest for the trees and we don't see the matrix. And also, we don't realize that even if we see the matrix, there's still so many more mind games to it, like those examples. They're only small examples, there's a billion examples. I see it all the time now because I see that there are always two ways of looking at everything now, whereas before I only saw the one way, like most people do. And I think this is how most people do, because otherwise they wouldn't be playing in the matrix so much, I don't think. But that's, I wouldn't think they would. But if they are seeing both sides and then they've made a choice to go with one thing, that's that's not for me to say one way or the other. But my only thing would be that I think most of us are not probably seeing all the sides and the way that it is, like that really. I think time's slipping away now. I don't normally like to go into personal stuff. I went into vampires because I think that's not personal, even though in this real world, if people are going to a darker side of things and embracing, how shall I say, if they are embracing more of a dark type of thing. Oh, I'm trying not to be very direct here, but it's a bit like you can, as I say, you can be like a Dracula where you think it's okay to worship and to love and to think that something that you would have normally thought was against your own thing as a human being. Because I am saying here that a human being is, we always in the past had established ideas of what a human being was and how they should at least basically think or at least do things. And I'm saying that you can be tweaked to where, even at a human level, um, you see yourself even as a human being different. Because that vampire example was a good example of that, I think. If I put only if I put it across the right way, which I probably didn't, but I'm sure if someone else put it there, you'd get what I'm saying. And but anyway, I was going to address something, even though I went on so long in this video, but I only use the mobile phone. I don't have a computer, okay? So if the odd person does, I don't mean odd, but well, we're all odd, but it's better to be odd these days, I think, anyway, because at least you might be thinking, maybe thinking a little bit more and just not going along with everything that is presented to you, because this is where you are very much in the matrix, and the matrix then has you, as the movie said, the matrix has you, Neo. I think that was a line in it, and that's it. You don't want, it will have you. It has most people. It had me for a lifetime, even though I was not a very big player in the matrix. That's the funny thing. I was less of a player than most people, but it had me in the sense that I did nothing, and that I was not aware of anything, and that my moods were controlled by the matrix. In other words, the frequency, the human frequency was controlled completely by the matrix, completely. And my mood was often kept right very low. I was aware of it, but I still was powerless against it. I didn't know it was the matrix. I thought it was just me. I thought it was my own mind games, which it kind of is too, but it's not your own mind games. It is your own mind games because we don't have full control of our own minds, and because we're unaware that our mind is manipulated so much. We're unaware we're playing in a matrix. We're unaware, if you don't know you're playing in a video game, you are totally at the mercy of the video game. And this is essentially how I was. And if it hadn't been exposed to me very recently, I would still be playing in it. Actually, I would feel better, but because that was the funny thing, I was about to raise my vibration just a little bit because I had woke up not so much to the matrix. No, I hadn't woken up to the big matrix. No, that was not exposed to me. But I had woke up or seen the personal matrix a little bit more. Whereas most of my life I was in the dark about even people, real people I mean, in a personal way. So I was totally oblivious that there was manipulation even at personal levels. I didn't know that even humans manipulate one another, which they do, but they're usually working for the matrix, they're playing in the matrix. Most of them are not aware as human beings that they are being manipulated by the matrix to play other human beings to bring the frequency down. The best example of that is, like I said in the other thing, where you have certain types of humans who should be great assets to the matrix, but the matrix closes them down early because they might have more abilities, but the matrix will get to them quicker because they will say, hey, this person is a go-getter, this person has influence, this person is that, so that person has to be taken over by the matrix even more quick, made more negative, low frequency, and more able to operate against and work other humans to keep them in low frequency. If I'm putting that properly, a bit like a psychopathic type person will be made into a psychopathic type person by the matrix, so that the matrix has more control over that person to then control others or to operate negative with others. Because if that person was at a higher frequency and not psychopathic, which is more of a negative personality trait, they're not for humans, they're not caring about other humans so much. Whereas as spiritual human beings, we're all supposed to have a little bit of understanding of another human being. Whereas a psychopathic person has no understanding of another human being. Their only understanding of another human being is like the God entity. He's more technical and less feeling towards the human being. And their attitude is, we know the human has the feelings, but we don't have the feelings, but we are going to exploit the human feelings. In other words, they don't actually think that way at all themselves. They have no what they say, no empathy for the human, but they know that humans have empathy, so they will exploit that and use that to bring down the frequency, to make the other human less at a lower frequency, not as happy, and they get the negative energy from that. The same as the God entity. He likes the low frequencies. I've said before, he operates that way. He's like a vampire. A vampire needs the blood. Some people need the low energy. It's their way of making themselves feel better. It's their way of making themselves alive. The vampire needs the blood to make himself alive, to live, to survive. The particular types of human beings need the life force of the other human beings. In other words, they're negative and they need the positive. They need to drain the positive from the normal human being into themselves so they live, because that's been pushed down. They've pushed that away from themselves. It's usually created by the matrix, because these humans often would have had potential to be quite high vibrational human beings, I would think. So this is the tragedy. So it's like saying that we're in this a bit of a battle in a way with this good and evil and this, oh, you know, this, there again, it's all a setup, it's all exploited because they know that we think this way. But oh dear, but oh, I've lost it there. But the humans that have gone negative, like a psychopathic type of personality, they should be the more human beings' biggest asset and biggest ally, shall we say, because they probably had potential and they also are still spiritual human beings. But this is all designed by the Matrix, so there are less spiritual human beings that have the potential for high vibration, because if you have the more stronger ones, yes, I'm actually saying that even what you would consider to perhaps be the lesser human beings, the ones that are more psychopathic type of thing, I'm saying that these actually probably are human beings that were, that if they were at a high vibration or even able to raise their vibration, that the fact that they have been pushed right down to being psychopathic is because they are potential danger to the Matrix, because they're probably human beings that if they were at a high vibration, they would be using that for positive, to change the matrix, to change the vibration. And so they have been, the matrix has come down on them at a very early age to make sure that they do not evolve into spiritual high vibrational beings, is what I'm saying. Whereas the rest of us, like myself, I was allowed to, you know, they didn't have to come down to turn me into a psychopath type of thing at a young age, because they were able to manipulate and control me just by the mind games, by the mind parasites, and make me, I was a lot easier to to keep at that low vibration without having to put quite as much trauma, although all of us, and even I, would consider that, you know, your early years would have been relatively traumatic, but that's a degree, you know, like I can't compare with other people. I can't say that someone else was traumatized more. It all depends, and also it depends on how trauma affects the individual, because the God entity knows that what would traumatize me might not traumatize someone else so much, so they will have to pick the right trauma for each human being to keep them at the low frequency, shall we say. It's a mind game. It's I think. But anyway, I was just going to say, and I better finish up here because I can see that it's getting late and I've gone on for too long. But I only started this video to address a comment, because I can't read the comments, as I say, because I've only got this and I don't have glasses and I can't see even what comes up on this screen, and I haven't got a computer, so I can only use this mobile phone, and it comes up only very quick if I see a comment. Not that I get a real lot, but there was, and I don't like to get personal. By that I mean I'm quite happy if I was talking to that particular lady right this very minute. If she asked me directly a question, I'd be quite happy to say yes or no. But because I'm doing the video and other people will be listening, and it could be considered, see, some of these subjects, asking things these days and anytime, because I don't know about every subject, you know, like it was essentially asking something about, perhaps I should just make a comment this way without saying what she asked, but it was about a particular type of human being, in the sense that, you know, sometimes when children are born, they might have different, they might be a different, no, I'm not going into what you might be thinking. They might have like They might have what a normal person would consider to be a bit of a disability, almost, you could say, or a problem, or a situation that children, like bit like, what was it, a few years ago, where all children seem to be having, what was it, ADT or something like that. I can't see, I've not looked into all these things, right? I don't look in, even though I have had people close to me when I was younger that did have certain conditions. But even there, I would have to say that I was in the dark. I did not look into them. I just accepted the person to have that. And it didn't particularly, like, it's a bit like if you have a brother or sister that has something, you tend to accept that, and you don't tend to, after a while, it becomes just, part of your life, sort of thing. And I never really looked into what the causes were. Only recently would I have actually thought, and this is only because of waking a bit up to things and becoming a bit more aware and actually questioning and saying, hey, I wonder why that relative was born that way with that problem, which did impact their life quite a bit. I was like, what physical thing caused that? Was it the birth? Was it this, or was it that? And I was actually trying to figure that out, almost just at my own personal curiosity. But anyway, I won't go into that, but the question that I saw, I think it was a question, and myself, and this is just my own view, but it is related to what I would see human beings as now. All I can really say, this is what I think about I just say this, and I might have even said it in another video. I think it is better as spiritual human beings that all humans are born naturally. And by that I mean with as little intervention, a bit like the God entity, the intervention with humans. Now, some people might say, right, and I get this, that this is where I don't like to go really, but I'm going to say quite honestly, okay, right. If a man and woman come together to create a life, and there is no intervention and nothing external affecting that, you should have a complete spiritual human being. My own view is that if there is manipulation, genetic manipulation, artificial, anything artificial, okay? This is technical, okay? I'm trying to put it, I'm being airy-fairy, I don't want to be too direct. And I don't understand every single thing about birth and what happens and all this. This is just what comes to me, is that you could create, theoretically speaking, okay, and I'm sure it's possible anyway. You could, like, everyone wants to have a healthy child, right? Everyone wants to have a perfect baby, a perfect child, a healthy child, an intelligent child, a pretty child, a this child, a that child. I'm saying no. This is my view. And you can laugh and disagree, and I wouldn't blame you, because I would have thought this way myself. If you sort of said to me, look, I want to have an intelligent child, so if I could put an intelligent gene into that child, surely I should do that. Surely I would be a bad parent if I deprived that child of that intelligent genetic gene. Surely if I could give that child a physical, stronger body, surely I should give that child that gene. Surely if that child, if I chose, if it suits my own as a mother or as a father, if I want a baby that has particular features, is there anything wrong in me doing that? You know, I don't want my baby born with a defect, say. I should correct that. I should make sure that doesn't happen. This is a dilemma. This is a dilemma. And it is a dicey subject, and not one that I like to go into, and not one that I've even really thought a lot about. But it's very hard to explain this. And it's not a position that humans should have to be in. I'll say that, but it is a position that humans have been in, and are faced with. And many people that have children will be faced with decisions and will have to make a choice sometimes along these lines. And in the future, these things could be actually directly offered to you, and you would say, why not? Why would I not want to give my child a bit like saying, why would I not try to give my child the best education and the best health care and the best of this and that? Well, you see, this is where I differ, and I would have to say, how can you give? We live in a matrix. It's a low frequency matrix, okay? Bottom line, low frequency matrix. It is a controlled matrix. In thinking that you might be giving the best, you could well be giving the worst, because it's a matrix and it's a duality world. It's a game. It's not there to give you the choice to say, I am going to create something. You're a player. You are not the mastermind behind it. You are not in that, you're not going to be given that position. And if you are, then you are still playing in the matrix. So that means that, and we're spiritual beings, okay? So coming from that pretext, you have to come from that basic pretext. This is the thing. If you don't come from that basic pretext, then it will be fine for you to say, yes, it would be better for me to have a child conceived where I could have more input into it, to where I would, yes, use the technology and stuff to make that baby so-called more better able. Well, you will make the baby better. You will make the baby better to live in the mind game matrix. You will not make that baby better to be a spiritual human being. That's how I see it, okay? So if you want your baby to grow up and be successful, if you can be successful in the matrix, in a low frequency matrix, so you will have to have a baby that is able to play in a low frequency matrix and be part of that society of the Matrix, that culture of the Matrix, that whatever's going on at the time in the Matrix. But it will be different to a spiritual human being. This is what I think anyway. So, and most people would think that, well, like if I have a child, if I would want them to have, as I say, the best education and this and that. But, if you're coming from a different angle, shall we say, and you sort of say, well, what is the education? Like if we don't have the proper history and we don't see the full matrix and we only see the tree, not the forest, okay, as I say, if you want to just live in the tree and not browse around the forest and not see the forest, you will survive, I suppose. But the answer to the question, even though I didn't say what the question really was because I didn't want to go into it, look, I'm trying to get this point across to the person that asked without being too specific. Look, if you have a baby naturally and it turned out that that baby had some sort of difficulty, shall we say, yes, supposing the baby could not go to school or learn as well as the mind control matrix child, the perfect child, the one that you've given the extra abilities to, the extra intelligence, shall we say, you've genetically engineered a child almost. And the other baby is in a world of its own almost, you could say, not able to adapt to the matrix education system, or whatever you want to call it, when you go to school, not able to get a job the same as or a high paying job even, or whatever, that you follow what I'm saying. Is the question, or is there, and this is somewhere that I didn't intend to go and don't wish to, is I am saying that if we are spiritual human beings in a physical body, our thought creates reality, we're all connected, but essentially just if we are spiritual human beings and we should be accessing other abilities in other realms, physically and mentally, whatever, you cannot be sure that the child that is genetically engineered with all the perfect qualities, the higher intelligence even, is going to be more superior than the human being that was conceived naturally but appeared to have problems. You cannot know for sure that a child that appears to be in its own closed world and cannot even communicate as I am now very well, to where you would say, yes, that person is a bit backward, shall we say. Whereas this other one over here, this genetically engineered child, is perfect and so intelligent, and it will go far in this matrix world. You cannot be sure that that genetically engineered so-called perfect child is more spiritually advanced than the other one. In fact, the other one is much more likely to be spiritually advanced human being, that in the long run, knowing the full picture, which most of us don't, that what would be perceived to be the limited child in our false reality, yes, is going to be a much more superior spiritual human being than the genetically engineered, modified, artificial human being that has been designed for the opposite. That will be the inferior product. This is what I'm saying. If you, I shouldn't say product because it's not, but that's how it really is. It's a product. That human being is a product. It has been made artificially and and will lose spirituality through that process. Sure, it could have more intelligence. Sure, it could be physically healthy. You could have a physically unhealthy baby, that's right, which is sad. And this is the sad dilemma of this world we live in, because none of this should really happen. In my view, all babies should just be born and they should all be healthy and they should all be high level spiritual human beings. But this does not happen. The matrix does not work that way. And, you know, it puts us in these awkward positions. Even if you cannot have a child, you are put then in that awkward position I've said before, where then if you couldn't have a child naturally, well, then you would have to go genetically. You would have to go to where science offers you some solution. So immediately you're, in my view, immediately you are put in that position where you cannot create a natural spiritual human being. Now, that also is open to debate, because if you're not coming from the viewpoint that we're spiritual human beings, then you would probably be fine with genetic modification, genetic intervention, scientific intervention, and all that, because you would say, hey, the human being is only a body and a mind and an intelligence. There's nothing more to them. They do not have access to higher realms. That 98% or whatever it is that's closed down is not closed down. It is not, it doesn't have a purpose. It's junk DNA, like they tell us. The mind is all there is, and high intelligence and high IQ is all that counts. Any other child or one that goes into their own world and might be seeing or hearing things that is backward. That is not, you know, that would be their thinking. That would not, you know.